Every now and again we see a team that comes out of nowhere and shocks the world. For example, we've recently seen the 2015 Atlanta Hawks, who went from 38 to 60 wins in one season, the 2017 LA Rams, who went from 4-12 to 11-5 in one season. But this is a story about a team in baseball that everybody slept on. Despite a new logo change and color change, despite a group of young and talented players, nobody expected what was about to happen in the 2008 MLB season. In 2007, the at the time Devil Rays lost 96 games, and the only goal for them from an outsider's perspective was not to lose 100 games in 2008. Speaking of Devil Rays, there was no more Devil. The team rebranded their image in the 2007 offseason and just went with the name Tampa Bay Rays. From the dull green and gray to a sharp-looking dark blue and white color combination, while the new image created some excitement, the product on the field wasn't exactly top-notch. Not only was there a lack of talent on the 2007 roster, but being in the same division as the powerhouse Yankees and Red Sox, who won 94 plus games that season, didn't create much optimism for Rays fans and their team. Unfortunately, at this time, there was no one-game wild card, so in order for the Rays to have a shot at the postseason, they would have to get through one of those teams. Now, how crazy would it be for the Rays to even approach the 90-win plateau in 2008? I'll put it this way, the Devil Rays have been around for 10 seasons at this point and had a franchise-high 70 wins back in 2004. In an article prior to the 2008 season, Bleacher Report released an article with their predictions for every team. The Rays were listed to go 78-84, which would have been a franchise-best season, but they didn't even expect them to be a 500 ball club. Now that we have everything laid out, let's actually get into this 2008 season. The Tampa Bay Rays had their best start in franchise history with a record of 55-32, 23 games over 500. Along with their best start, they were the first team since 1900 with the worst record in baseball the previous year to have the best record on July 4th. On August 10th, the Rays earned their 71st victory in an 11-4 win over the Mariners. This best their franchise previous of 70 wins in 2004. They would ultimately win 97 games by end of the regular season, 27 more than their previous record. The Rays would go on to reach the postseason for the first time in franchise history. With all of this random success, there needs to be some recognition for some of the team's main contributors. Prior to the 2007 season, the Devil Rays signed power-hitting first baseman Carlos Pena, who was bounced around between the Yankees and Red Sox organizations before signing with Tampa. He went on to be the Rays' main power source from 2007 to 2010. Pena came out of nowhere in 2007 and matched 46 home runs and drove in 121 RBIs. In 2008, he went on to have a more quiet yet respectable season with 31 home runs and 102 RBIs. This 2008 Rays team thrived defensively, and Pena was a main contributor who went on to win a Gold Glove at first base that season. Another excellent defender, especially in his younger days, was 22-year-old rookie third baseman Evan Longoria. Fans of Tampa Bay were much anticipating his call-up to the majors, and when starting third baseman Willie Ibar went to the DL, it opened up a spot for baseball's number 2 ranked prospect. Longoria looked like a future star right away and even earned a 9-year contract that would pay him $44 million only a week after his call-up. During the regular season, Longo went on to hit .272 with 27 home runs and 85 RBIs. In 2007, it looked as if the Rays had a 5-tool player that can blossom into one of the baseball's best players. At 22 years of age, B.J. Upton hit .300 with 24 home runs and 82 RBIs while covering tons of ground in center field. Right when it looked as if Upton was going to turn into a power hitter, he registered 9 home runs in 2008, but went on to steal 44 bases, which improved his 2007 total by 22. Tampa had another electric young outfielder on their hands by the name of Carl Crawford. Unfortunately for Crawford, he missed 7 weeks in 2008 due to a finger injury, but turned in a respectable season overall. In 109 games, the Rays left fielder hit .273 with 69 runs and 25 stolen bases. By the time he was 25 years old, Crawford had already appeared in 2 All-Star games, so it seemed as if they already had another star in their hands. Players like Deoner Navarro, Jason Bartlett, and Akinori Iwamura weren't considered quote-unquote stars, but played big roles for the Rays in 2008. These 3 went on to hit over .270 offensively, and Navarro was a big impact on the young pitching staff for the Rays, throwing out 38% of would-be base stealers, which ranked 3rd in baseball in 2008. On to the Rays' 2008 pitching staff, which was filled with young studs who were able to put it all together in the same season. Between their 5 main starters in 2008, every pitcher was under the age of 26 years old. James Shields led the staff with 215 innings pitched and pitched to a 3.56 ERA. The righty finished 6th in innings pitched and ranked 3rd in complete games, including 2 shutouts, which was tied for the best in baseball that year. Andy Sonnenstein never had a quote-unquote good season in the MLB, but his second season in 2008 was his best as a pro. Although he had a 4.38 ERA, he locked into 13 wins and only 9 losses. He was nothing spectacular that season, but he gave the Rays stability and an innings eater in the rotation. And hey, we've seen guys like Jeff Samardzija have nice long careers who put up similar numbers to what Sonnenstein did in 2008. A 24-year-old pitcher by the name of Matt Garza was another intriguing young pitcher for the Rays rotation. Garza has spent his first 2 big league seasons in Minnesota, but was traded along with shortstop Jason Bartlett to Tampa for a few players, including former big league prospect Delman Young. Based on how Young's career went, you can safely say the Rays won this trade looking back on it. Garza went on to pitch to a 3.7 ERA with 11 wins and tied teammate James Shields for a league-leading 2 shutouts in 2008. Edwin Jackson, who recently just broke an MLB record for playing on the most teams, was just another 24-year-old at the time who was on his second team in Tampa. As a 19-year-old in 2003, Jackson had pitched for the LA Dodgers but was traded to the Rays after 2005 for Denys Baez and Lance Carter. In 2008, Jackson, like Sonnenstein, pitched to an ERA in the mid-4s, but still found a way to win 14 games that season. Jackson had a live arm but had trouble with walks and keeping the ball in the ballpark. Lastly, the Rays had yet another talented young starter in Scott Kazmir. Kazmir was the only one in this rotation who had more strikeouts than innings pitched, and possibly the highest upside amongst the Rays pitchers, at least until David Price entered the picture. Kazmir was a former first-round pick by the Mets in 2002 and was traded for Victor Zambrano and another player in the summer of 2004 to Tampa. In 2008, Kazmir missed the start of the season with an arm injury, which caused him to start 27 games instead of 30+. Despite missing the first month of the season, Kazmir went on to make the 2008 All-Star team. The Rays also had some valuable bullpen arms that season, guys like J.P. Howell, Grant Balfour, Dan Wheeler, and experienced closer Troy Percival all had nice seasons for the 2008 Tampa Bay Rays. On to the 2008 postseason. The Rays went on to win the AL East in 2008, giving the Boston Red Sox the wild card spot and spoiling the Yankees' final season in their old stadium by making them miss the playoffs. The Rays' first matchup in the ALDS was the Chicago White Sox, and the Rays took care of them in 4 games, taking the series 3-1. Aside from Matt Garza in Game 3, Rays starters did not allow more than 2 earned runs and pitched at least 5 innings in every start. Carlos Pena hit .500 that series, and B.J. Upton provided the power with 3 home runs in that 4-game span. The ALCS brought us an exciting matchup with division foe, the Boston Red Sox. To make things better, the series would end up going the full 7 games. In Game 7, the pitching matchup was Matt Garza versus John Lester, and they had a pitcher's duel throughout most of the game. Garza went 7 innings with 1 earned run, and the Rays' 3 runs came from 3 different players, including Evan Longoria, Rocco Baldelli, and Willie Ibar, who hit a home run in the 7th inning to expand the lead to 3-1. After Garza departed, manager Joe Maddon used 4 different pitchers in the 8th inning to get 3 outs. He went with Dan Wheeler, J.P. Howell, Chad Bradford, and David Price. Price was put into the game with the bases loaded and 2 outs in the top of the 8th, only up 2 runs. No pressure for a 22-year-old, right? Price got a favorable strike 3 call to get J.D. Drew looking and escaped a bases-loaded jam. Price went back out for the 9th and a chance to send Tampa to its first World Series in franchise history. He started with a walk to dangerous hitter Jason Bay and went on to strike out Mark Kotsay, then Jason Varitek to follow. The game ended on a hard-hit ground ball to second baseman Iwamura, and he stepped on second to send the Rays to the 2008 World Series. The 2008 World Series had 3 games decided by 1 run, and 1 game that was decided by only 2. Unfortunately for the Rays, this series was highlighted by their young star third baseman going 1 for 20 with 9 strikeouts. No one in the Rays lineup had consistent success anyway, as the only starter to hit over 300 in the series was Deoner Navarro. The Philly starters deserve much credit, as guys like Cole Hamels, Brett Myers, 45-year-old Jamie Moyer, Joe Blanton, and once again Cole Hamels all turned in quality starts in each game. The game that Rays fans should want back is probably Game 3. After J.P. Howell hit Phillies hitter Eric Bruntlett, the Rays brought in Grant Balfour to preserve the tie, but Balfour threw a wild pitch and an overthrow by catcher Deoner Navarro put Bruntlett on third base with no outs as the winning run. Carlos Ruiz hit a bases-loaded, no-out dribbler to win the game for Philadelphia and put them up 2-1 in the series. The Phillies took care of the Rays in 5 games and their magical run was over. Cole Hamels took home MVP honors, going 4-0 in the 2008 postseason. Although they didn't win at all, the Rays have much to be optimistic about, with most of their young stars not even reaching their prime yet. But how come this Rays team never went on to another World Series? How come they never even made it to another ALCS? To answer these questions, let's look at what would happen in the coming years. A couple months after the World Series, the Rays went on to trade one of those 24-year-old starters in Edwin Jackson for outfield prospect Matt Joyce. At the time, this move seemed okay considering the Rays had a rotation spot open for David Price, and the assumption was that Joyce would help their offense. From 2009 to 2014, Joyce was a mediocre player for Tampa and never hit more than 20 home runs in a single season. He did, however, make an All-Star appearance in 2011, where he had his best season for the Rays, hitting .277 with 19 home runs and 75 RBIs. As for Edwin Jackson, he also made an All-Star appearance in 2009 with an ERA of 3.62 and 214 innings pitched. Jackson would bounce around from team to team, and there was never a big winner in this particular trade. In 2009, just one season after their World Series appearance, the Rays won 84 games and missed the playoffs. On the bright side, another young player had a breakout season, and this time it was utility man Ben Zobrist. During his unexpected season, Zobrist had a .297 average with 27 dingers and 97 RBIs, including a team-best 8.6 WAR, which is wins above replacement. 2009 also saw one of the Rays' young pitchers being traded. This time it was Scott Kazmir. At this point in his career, Kazmir had been labeled as injury-prone, missing the start of the last 3 seasons in a row. He was sent to Los Angeles for relief pitcher Alex Torres and utility man Sean Rodriguez. Kazmir once had a ton of potential, but his reoccurring injuries forced the Rays to trade him for 50 cents on the dollar in terms of talent. Another member of the 08 Magical team was dealt, and this time it was Akinori Iwamura. Due to Zobrist bursting onto the scene at second base, Iwamura was no longer needed as an everyday player, making him expendable, and traded for Jesse Chavez, a relief pitcher who never pitched an inning in a Rays uniform. In 2010, the Rays were back, winning 96 games and being named AL East champions for the second time in 3 seasons. In 2010, it was a contract year for left fielder Carl Crawford, and with that extra motivation, he turned in his best season as a major leaguer. Crawford went on to hit .307 with 19 home runs and 90 RBIs, including 47 stolen bases. At just 28 years old, he was in line for a monster payday once the season concluded. Ben Zobrist took a step back in production, but the Rays' usual sluggers had nice seasons. Guys like Evan Longoria, BJ Upton, and Carlos Pena all had good seasons. In 2010, it also marked a breakout for David Price. After a disappointing second season for Price, he put it all together in year 3, pitching to a 2.72 ERA and getting 19 wins. James Shields and Matt Garza were good pitchers that year as well, but the Rays never had a true ace until that season, until David Price had his breakout year. The Rays went on to face the Texas Rangers in the ALDS, but quickly fell behind in the series 2-0. To their credit, the Rays fought back and tied it 2-2, but Cliff Lee outpitched David Price for the second time in that series, winning by a score of 5-1, which was coincidentally the score in Game 1 as well. Just like that, the Rays season was over, but still with a relatively young roster on hand, they felt they weren't done yet. Heading into the offseason, the Rays had to retain their star outfielder Carl Crawford. Unfortunately for Tampa, their star 28-year-old left fielder went on to sign a huge deal with the rival Boston Red Sox. Looking back on how this played out, the Rays dodged a bullet by letting Crawford go. He was one of those players that once he got his big contract, his stats never came close to the production he was doing in his prime in Tampa. They also lost successful reliever Grant Balfour, who signed a 2-year, $8 million deal with the Oakland A's. The Rays lost their slugger Carlos Pena, who went on to sign with the Chicago Cubs for 1 year. Pena had some great seasons in Tampa, including a 46 home run season in 2007. Pena was clearly getting up there in age, and the Rays thought it'd be best not to match the $10 million offer made by the Cubs. Speaking of the Cubs, Matt Garza was dealt to Chicago for Chris Archer, Brandon Guyer, and Robinson Chirinos, and Sam Fold. Willie Ibar and Deandre Navarro also walked that offseason. 2011 was another magical season for Tampa, although it didn't end in a World Series championship. The Rays trailed Boston and New York by a large amount entering the final month of the season. As most of us know, the Red Sox went on to have one of the biggest collapses in baseball history, going 6-18 after September 3rd. In the final game of the season, the Rays needed a Red Sox loss and a win of their own to make the postseason. The Rays got their wish. Boston blew a lead in the 9th inning, and the Rays came back to tie their game in the 9th and eventually won it in the bottom of the 12th. The Rays finished one game above Boston for second place in the AL East. The Rays also had a bright young pitcher on their hands in Jeremy Hellickson. Hellickson won Rookie of the Year going 13-10 with a 2.95 ERA in 2011. As for the 2011 postseason, the Rays took Game 1 over the Rangers with ease, getting a great performance from another young talented pitcher in Matt Moore. Unfortunately, the Rays dropped the next 3 games and lost the series in 4. As for the rest of the team, there are still members of the 2008 team that we have yet to cover on what happened to them. B.J. Upton left to join his brother Justin Upton in Atlanta after the 2012 season. Upton's best career season came in 2007 as a member of the Rays, and after his departure bounced around from team to team and never turned into what people thought he could be. As for Andy Sonnenstein, he never really made it in the MLB aside from his one decent season in 2008. The Rays tried to make him a reliever, but by the age of 28, he was out of baseball for good. After 2012, James Shields was traded to Kansas City for one of baseball's top prospects in Will Myers. Myers, though, never panned out in Tampa and was dealt to San Diego just 2 seasons later. David Price, who was considered the Rays' ace for about 6 seasons, did about all he could, but with the Rays slumping in 2014, he was dealt to Detroit for Drew Smyly, Nick Franklin, and Willie Adames. The problem with Price in Tampa was that he would put together great regular seasons, but never really excelled in the postseason as a starter. Evan Longoria lasted the longest from that 2008 team and never really turned into a big superstar that many thought he would be in his rookie year. He was still probably a top 30 player in my opinion during his time in Tampa, but never reached the heights of guys that we've seen today like Nolan Arenado or Mike Trout, for example. Longoria was great at the plate from 2008 to 2013, but for some reason in 2014 and 2015 his numbers dropped and hit a combined 43 home runs in those 2 seasons. To his credit, he was always reliable on the field and was very durable during his time in Tampa. After 2017, Longo was sent to the Giants for 3 prospects. Unfortunately for Longoria, he, just like Price, never lived up to the expectations during the playoffs, failing to hit over 300 in any playoff series during his Rays career. So in conclusion, what went wrong for the Rays? Obviously, they ran into some bad luck with young pitchers. Guys like Scott Kazmir, Jeremy Hellickson, Matt Moore, and even Alex Cobb could never stay healthy. As I mentioned, their stars went cold in the postseason as well. Even James Shields, who had pitched well in the 2008 playoffs, pitched poorly in the 2010 and 2011 playoffs. Other than Longoria, there were no consistent bats in that lineup year after year. You think back to recent World Series champions like the Astros and Cubs, and they always had multiple big hitters in their lineup they can count on year after year. As for the Rays, it was Longoria and Carlos Pena for 3 seasons, but after Pena left, they really didn't have a star next to Longoria in their lineup. Payroll was another big issue for the Rays. They really didn't make any big splashes in free agency and tried to do everything through their farm system or via trades. Some of the Rays' biggest free agent signings in that span were Cliff Floyd, Eric Hinsky, Fernando Rodney, who did have a .60 ERA and 48 saves in 2012, and Joel Peralta. Other than Rodney, they really didn't have any big free agent signings that worked out in their favor. But with all that being said, I do believe if the Rays had the commitment to pay big bats in the offseason, they probably would have more postseason success. Unfortunately, it never resulted in a championship, but the Rays gave baseball and their fans a great story of a team with no expectations.